perfectly common belief in God, but questioning. Questioning so fundamentally as to ask, should one question? And questioning so specifically as to ask, what is your recourse to God? For example, when and why and how do you pray? What about this? When do you pray?
Well, first of all, I ought to tell you what God means to me.
All right.
Well, to me, God is a sort of... Well, I'm afraid he's a sort of big brother. He's a crutch on which I can lean when I feel weak, or a crutch which I don't really need when I feel strong. I usually pray when I'm in a moment of need. For instance, when I went to the American Embassy for my interview to see if I could come here, I went into a church and I prayed. I needn't have been a church, but I prayed then.
Is this general? Is this why one prays?
Well, I think I agree with what Johnny says. For example, but I need God all the time, but I need him more when I'm in trouble. Not when I mean trouble, I don't mean serious trouble. Even when I'm alone or I'm afraid, I think I need God all the time. And I pray to him to help me in my studies, to help me to pass an exam, or to help me to do all the good things. In every way, I need him.
I think I do the same thing. I go to a temple or any place of worship just before my exams, and I sort of feel that God has too many things to bother about, and if I go to him for things daily, he's got one more person to burden with. But just when I need something and when I feel that I need his help and I've got something to lean on, it's only then that I really ask him to help me. And also when I've got to choose between something which I think is right and something which is wrong at the same time, I really need his help very badly. Then that I look upon him.
Do you mean then that you three record to God most of the time when you need something?
Well, not when you need him all the time, but you go to pray more to God, and you need him more when you're in trouble.
And you don't necessarily need things to help yourself. For instance, you could need something to help somebody else, so it's not purely egocentric.
Well, I don't know. I kind of regard this way as I think you treat God as a religious tap. I mean, you open it when you need it, and you close it when you don't need it. And then if you don't get anything out of opening it, you curse the tap.
Evie, do you pray to God daily? Do you think of God as something else than we do?
Yes, I do.
What is your concept of God?
Well, I think God is life. And I think he's the intangible goodness inside every man. And there's something that makes man strive to be at peace with himself and makes him hesitate before striking his neighbor.
Well, I'd like to ask you, let's first think, how do we know that God exists? Well, if you think that seeing is believing, if you see a thing, you can believe it. But I've been asking myself this question, why do I believe in God? I can't see him, but still I believe he exists.
You mean you only believe in what you see?
Well, yes, of course.
Well, that's different.
But I mean, I know I've been taught I must believe in God, but I'm hesitating. I just can't decide. I've always believed in my religion. I've never questioned my religion. But since coming to America and listening to other people and their points, and listening to an atheist and a Buddhist, I've decided that I must question it. And now when I come to the conclusion that I must find out if the God exists.
Evie, tell me, why do you believe in a God? Do you believe in a God because you were told there was a God, or because as a result of your own inquiries, you found that perhaps a God did exist?
I think that the reason why I believe in a God is because it honestly never occurred to me that one doesn't exist. It's natural that one exists.
Do you mean that if you'd been brought up, for instance, to think that there was a dog which existed in the jungle, for instance, which had 10 legs, you would have believed in that too?
No. You can't compare God with a dog.
Well, you can, because you don't know either of them. I think really, Avina, that if you'd been brought up in a Marxist school, you'd have been a Marxist.
I would have been until the moment I would have doubt.
Well, why don't you doubt now?
Because it's something, I don't doubt the existence of God. It's something essential to me.
But it's not necessarily true, is it?
It is true to me.
To you,
Johnny,
how have you proved it? This is important. How have you proved it?
that God exists?
Yes.
I don't have to prove it. I know. There are things you've got to accept without understanding. Why don't you go down off your pedestal of self-admirance?
Well, do you think that just because I question everything that I'm told, and that I criticize things which aren't necessarily proven as true, that I'm on a pedestal of self-admiration?
Yes, I do. Because everybody who says I only believe what I see or what I understand, doesn't have a very broad mind, I think.
Oh, this is a problem which all teenagers face, though. I mean, they're brought up in a certain religious narrow mold, and then at the age of 16 or 17, they suddenly see that perhaps there's a different conception of truth.
Yes, but you've got to understand that there are things which we are not meant to understand, because if we could understand everything, then every human being would go along creating little worlds.
Johnny, I can answer your question. For example, how do we know this? I ask the question, I can answer it for myself. Well, if you go back, you find how do things exist? Well, they say, let's say by science, if you go back into science, you reach a point where you can't explain anything further. Like we say, which came into the world first, the chicken or the egg? Now, I've asked an atheist this question, and he couldn't answer it, because that proves my point.
Well, I know the atheist reply to this. Now, personally, I do believe in God as the creator of the world and as the first cause. But just because your mind can't conceive of anything which hasn't got a cause, just because your own mind is human and you think in terms of cause and effect, it doesn't mean that the whole of creation came about by cause and effect. Your own mind has certain limits, but it doesn't mean that the whole of the world has. So, for instance, the Earth might have existed forever. It not necessarily had a cause. I personally think it must have done.
Okay, for example, when you're in trouble, when you need something, don't you pray to God?
Yes.
Well, then,
I also pray to God when I don't need anything, and I also appreciate God when I see something beautiful. So it's not really a religious tap, because I don't just turn it on when I feel like something, like a glass of religious water.
Okay, Evie, do you think that a person is religious if he does not question what he is given, suppose you're a Christian and you're told something about Christianity, and do you think you're being religious when you don't question your religion? When you don't try to find out what's in it?
Well, I believe in my religion, I mean, in something like these dogmas you're talking about. When I have, to start with, there are certain dogmas in Christianity you're not allowed to believe, and these are already part of what I said, something you've got to accept without understanding. But these dogmas, which I can understand, I even believe more firmly.
If I'm not mistaken, there's a part in Christianity when it is said that when Jesus died, the gates of heaven closed. Now, do you think that the gates of heaven have closed for every